Make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
That's approved unanimously. And we need a motion to approve the open session minutes of March 15th, 2021.
I make a motion to approve the open session minutes of March 15th, 2021.
All in favor? Aye. Minutes are approved. And we'll move on to student comments.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is just give me a minute. Marin,
are you there for student comments?
I am.
Super. Take it away. We've got Marin Shillelagh pinch hitting for Owen this evening.
Take it away.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Marin Shillelagh. I'm filling in for Owen tonight. Please bear with me as it is my first time doing this. Hopefully it all goes smoothly. I hope everyone had a great week last week and that our elementary students had a great first day back today. 1 week from today, we will be back for our first day of full in-person learning. I do have to say I am most excited about being able to see all my friends and classmates at one time. Not looking forward so much to the having to get up early every day, but it's okay. All joking aside, I'm really excited for this transition and I hope everybody else is too. We have an early release day this Friday, April 2nd, with classes ending at 10:45 a.m. This is a remote synchronous day for all students. Therefore, cohort 2 will be in person this week on Wednesday and Thursday. The Nipmuc Music Department presents its spring live stream this Wednesday evening, March 31st, starting at 7:30 p.m. The performance will include compositions by Frank Ticelli, Larry Dean, Julia Garreau, and many others performed by the concert band, wind ensemble, and jazz ensemble. Please join us for what will be a great musical event to kick off spring and showcase the hard work of our young musicians. The live stream can be seen on our website and on YouTube beginning at 7:30 p.m. Finally, there are only 7 days left in the term, with term 3 ending on April 7th. That's all I have for tonight. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Marin. So we will move on to community comments. So people watching this in the room with a comment, I think, from the community, but if anyone is watching via Zoom and has a comment, you can raise your hand and ask you to unmute yourself and speak.
It's okay. We're monitoring it. Okay, I don't see any hands.
All right, so we move on to superintendent's comments.
All right, good evening, everybody. Just a few things here. You have in your packet the, I thought kind of interesting, the kindergarten enrollment to date. And this is completely commensurate with what we discussed during our budget hearings. We're seeing a fairly dramatic uptick in kindergarten enrollment, for basically a lot of the reasons that we described. Right now, as of last Friday, we've got 20 additional kindergartners at Memorial. So right this year, we've got 73. And right now, we've got 93 enrolled. And at Clough, it's a gain of 16. We have gone from this current year, we have 63 at Clough, and right now we've got 79 enrolled. So keep in mind, it's still relatively early in the ball game. We, typically see through the month of April probably at least an increase of about 15% more, 15 to 20% more. So we're anticipating those numbers to go up. I think we're also really happy about the simple fact that if you look at the Spanish immersion, we've got some really, really healthy numbers there. 27 right now at Memorial and 24 at Clough. And, you know, our stated goal has always been to have 2 healthy strands at each elementary school. So I will continue to keep you posted on how that goes, but it's definitely very much in line with what we're predicting with regard to budget. Second piece on my report kind of speaks to some word that's been out in the community over the last 2 to 3 weeks with regard to the Warrior logo / mascot. As I say in my background notes, we have a student group here at Nipmuc who has put forward a petition, and this petition to date already has approximately 1,700 signatures asking to remove or change the Nipmuc Warrior logo. I think this is obviously a discussion that, you know, this is an issue rather that warrants a lot of discussion. I just want to acknowledge this. I've had the opportunity along with the high school administration to meet with these students. And in the interim, I feel like it's important for all of us to kind of do our due diligence and to have a conversation with the Nipmuc Nation. So I just report this out to kind of acknowledge it, that it's something out there, and I'm sure that we will have more on this issue very, very shortly. Okay. And then last but not least, FY21 budget update. You have in your packet the most current year-to-date expenditure report. And then furthermore, I just would like to acknowledge the good work of our Director of Business and Operations, Jay Fire. You can see the relatively lengthy grant award totaling $66,843 that was worked on. A FEMA grant to cover some of our expenses for PPE items that were purchased really from the beginning of this crisis, but to get our kids back. So Jay, is there anything with regard to the year-to-date that you want to touch upon?
Not at this time. Everything still seems pretty stable, so I'm fairly confident where we're headed at this point with various grants that we have in our budget. Ironically, that FEMA grant originally was $105,000. We kept cutting it down, so we have 66, which is still better than nothing. Anyway, you know, I think we're in pretty good shape right now.
And that's all I have.
Got a question?
Sure.
So Jay, is there any more definition of what's happening with the federal funds?
Mean the bike funds.
Yes, the bike funds.
So they have not released to us yet school district allocations. They've released town allocations. Both towns are getting a fairly substantial amount. The rumor mill was it was like 2.5 times what we got for ESSER 2, which would put it at about 500,000 if that comes true. But right now they've not released any of it yet. I keep looking and I see nothing so far.
Are there any dates that
There's not even a mention of it yet on the SE website.
Okay.
So we should hopefully be receiving word on that within a couple weeks.
So how does the early numbers on the bump in kindergarten enrollment affect like staffing needs?
We anticipate if even if the kindergarten enrollment comes as is, as predicted for the FY22 budget, we'll be able to cover that. The need is again grade 4 at Memorial, where we have that request for one additional FTE there.
Other comments or questions? On the new business?
Okay, the first thing, as Marin mentioned, is today was the first day coming back for our youngest learners. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a quick share here. And I'm a big believer in telling a story with pictures. So really, I spent an hour at both Memorial and Clough this morning. I felt like it was, things went very, very smoothly. As you can see, the picture on the left is ukuleles have become the new recorder for our kids at the elementary. And I think that is one of maybe a few silver linings from the pandemic. All right, let's be honest here. The recorders can go away forever. You know, I had a little bit of an aha moment. You know, this is at Clough, this is recess, this is lunch. My friend on the right there, she really looks very unenthused. I probably just caught the picture at a bad time. The kids were really great during lunch. But I had one of these aha moments, to be 100% honest. And you can see the picture on the left. That is Olga Grau's kindergarten class. And God bless her, she's got 24 kids. And I had the opportunity, I was there with Wendy Bell around 10:30, and it was snack time. And Olga was amazing that she had the kids separated, some on the floor, then some in this kind of checkerboard pattern at their desks and so on, keeping that 6 feet of distance. And I was standing in the corner of the room, and there was two little girls, and they went into their lunchbox. They were setting up their snack, and the two were chatting away, very friendly, very nice. And then there was a pause, and one of the girls said to the other girl, by the way, what is your name? And it was like, whoa, I guess this is like the first day of school for the kids. So there definitely is a little bit of adjustment, but I think all in all, there was a lot of smiles, a lot of kids really, really happy to be back with the teachers that they love. So really, really pleased about that, to say the least. Just as I say in a few things, I really want to give a lot of credit to our district leadership team, our principals, who've been working tremendously over the last 4 weeks or so, or maybe even less than that, 3 weeks, pulling this together so quickly and thinking about all of the safety protocols, all of the mitigation strategies that are really, really important. Also, hats off to our assistant superintendent, Maureen Cohen, for doing really a yeoman's job in pulling together the district safety protocol document. Another piece, just kind of as a follow-up, our standalone remote program, as we expected, has about a 30% decrease. Up until the change, we had a little under 200, about 197 kids, K through 12. That's dropped down to 130. We did have a tiny little bit of transfer of some parents opting that their kids were in hybrid, that they didn't want to go 5 days a week. That went into standalone remote, but for the most part, it was migration the other way. And actually, our biggest change was at the elementary level, K through 4, where we previously had 70 kids in standalone remote, and now we're down to only 39. So all in all, I think, you know, it's only one day, knock on wood, things have gone very, very well, but we are pleased with how things are progressing so far. Any questions on anything coming back? Okay, the second piece that I'd like to be able to share with you is, when we met 2 weeks ago, we had the full presentation, which is usually an hour to an hour and a half. And what I'd like to do is I would like to use every meeting between now and May just to kind of as a short hit, so to speak, a short aspect of the budget that I think is really salient and help people understand some simple concepts. And I'm, always I'm appreciative to work with Jay because Jay helps me boil things down. And I just want to share, I literally have 4 slides here that just kind of speak to a real simple issue. Why do we have the magnitude of the increase that we're seeing this year? So as we know, the increase is fairly significant. It's an increase of pushing 2.5 million, 2,488,758, which is a little bit more than 6.6% over our current fiscal year 2021 budget. Now, as we were in this place 6 years ago in 2015, when also an override request was made of both communities, I can't underscore the point enough that the overwhelming majority of this increase is to simply maintain level services. And by maintaining level services, I simply mean to keep our existing programs, our existing services, and our existing staff intact. Okay, this is not a budget request that's loaded with, hey, these are things that we really would like to have, okay? So just as a real simple illustration, if you were to take a look at what are the key budget drivers, if we had to put them in categories. Yes, Sam?
Sorry, Director. Would you mind sharing your screen?
Oh, it's not shared?
I apologize.
No. No problem whatsoever.
Excellent. Thank you very much. It's going through.
Perfect. So if you were to break down what the expenditures are related strictly to level services, this is how it would break down. First off, contractual obligations. So about 659,000 is tied up in looking at how our educators and different paraprofessionals and so on, what they have coming due to them as far as increasing to different steps and lanes in the salary progression. So you would say that those are contractual obligations. Then thinking about what is a reasonable market value COLA or cost of living adjustment, you do reserve that for salary negotiations. And keep in mind, we are now in contract negotiations with all 5 parties. What they have coming due to them as far as increasing to different steps and lanes in the salary progression. So you would say that those are contractual obligations. Then thinking about what is a reasonable market value COLA, cost of living adjustment, you do reserve that
Quite a bit.
for salary negotiations. And keep in mind,
There we go.
we
Don't
are
worry,
now
it's all right,
in
we're not-
contract negotiations with all 5.
Who's that guy talking? He sounds really smart. Then as we discussed, you kind of have a little bit of a perfect storm as far as the renewal of our digital textbooks, particularly here at the high school and at MISCO. So a significant investment is needed there, again, to maintain those existing licenses. Then both with special education, contracted services, and then as you can see towards the bottom, English language learners. We talked 2 weeks ago about the increased demand of increased population of multilingual learners within the district. Health insurance is one of the bright areas, and we're actually realizing a reduction there for the simple reason that we had a 0% increase for staff, but also some savings for our retirees. And then you can see other things that we're hit with. A 5% increase in the Worcester County Regional Retirement System for our employees that are not in the State Teachers Association. We talked about some move-ins to the district for some out-of-district tuitions, students with some real significant needs that need specialized instruction. We talk about how we have to plan for a net of 3 increased students for Norfolk Aggie, and that tuition that the regional school district takes on is approximately $22,000 per student. So a fairly modest increase in our transportation contract with Telstone and Sons. And then the technology piece, we talked about re-upping our lease for our desktops with HP. And then also the upgrade to all 4 schools, our Wi-Fi system and some of that infrastructure. And then again, we could have an honest debate about whether this is level services or if this is a targeted investment. But all 3 of our schools have a tractor mower/plow that are in the ballpark of at least 20 years old. So we're looking to make an investment to replace those. So as you can see, over $1.9 million, $1,919,913 is just for level services. So if you look at the remaining amount, these are really the strategic investments. And we talked about these positions that I think at least 3 of them, of those 7, are really the restoration of positions that were cut in the FY20 budget, and specifically the library media specialist position here at Nipmuc and also tech support. But those other key positions are really very much related, 2 of those positions, to really our kids' social emotional well-being, and really the key being 2 of the school adjustment counselors, critically needed. And then we talked a little bit about how athletics, particularly here at Nipmuc, has kind of taken it on the chin due to all of the COVID restrictions. And as a result, we don't have a lot of those gate receipts that helps defray some of the costs for the athletics program. And then Jay very wisely usually budgets a little bit extra for special education and health insurance changes, because you can have a situation where somebody gets married, has a child, and changes to a different plan during the course of the school year. So as you can see, in grand total, about 569,000 of that almost 2.5 million are really something new that is a strategic investment in our district. So if you were to break that down, over 3/4, 77.1% of the increase is strictly for level services. Again, strictly to keep our existing programs, services, and staffing. And for those of you, and I know at least you, Lee, and you, Phil, were on the committee back in 2015, and I know the rest of you were actively involved. This is the same exact situation that we were in 6 years ago, where yes, that campaign Forward 15 was about thinking forward for the district and specifically around our strategic plan. But the heart of the matter was we desperately needed that 2015 override to sustain our district. And here we are 6 years later, we're in the same exact situation. I can't stress that enough. And again, without appropriate support, we will be looking at significant deleterious effects in the district. The first one being increased class sizes. When you are in this really challenging situation where you're cutting staff, you really have to preserve the academic core. And as a result, you would have a reduction in a lot of elective offerings, particularly at the secondary level, you know, i.e. music, arts, business, world languages, and so on. Again, in thinking about those strategic investments, you would be looking at less academic and social emotional supports and interventions for our kids who need it at the most, but also need it at a time coming off a remarkably challenging year, to say the least. And you could say a remarkably challenging 2 academic years. I think, again, we kind of go back to the future, unfortunately, to 2009, 2010, where we would have to look long and hard at increasing our user fees for not only athletics, but also extracurriculars. And then this, in all of its sum total, represents significant regression from our core mission as a regional school district, and specifically empowering all learners to thrive. Without this, we cannot do that critical work so all of our kids can thrive. So again, I appreciate Jay and kind of boiling it down to the drivers, really simplistically, as far as what do we essentially need in this budget for level services and which are targeted investments. So any thoughts or questions on that?
Thank you for putting it together. It's helpful,
Sure.
I think, for people to understand.
Absolutely.
But just like to make a comment as well, it's like the additional investments that you have here, I think are very smart and targeted, especially for the time that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
The assessment counselors and the coaches for curriculum, I think, are extremely important, because we can't just think of going back to school as going back to the way it was. We have a lot of problems that have been exacerbated by the delay in education, or the time off from in-person education. And it's going to take a lot of adjustment to get those kids back in shape. So we're looking at not only meeting services, but making sure we address unique conditions of this time. And I think that's important to understand.
I agree.
Can you share the slides?
Absolutely. Great.
Prom.
Sure. Another exciting discussion. So I kind of bring this up for discussion purposes, and I'm going to kind of ask John and Mary Ann to kind of elaborate a little bit more in depth. But as I say in the background notes, I know that there are a lot of parents that are kind of chomping at the bit to kind of return to normalcy. To be fair, I think we're all chomping at the bit to return to normalcy. But probably other than first grade, kindergarten, second grade, third grade parents, throughout this entire crisis, the group of parents that I've heard from the most are the parents of our seniors. And to be honest, if you're a member of the class of 2021, it's kind of been a tough stretch as far as having a lot of those typical rites of passage that you really look forward to in your junior and senior year. So I know that our prom is scheduled for Friday, May 14th at the Lakeview Pavilion in Foxborough. And we're kind of in this interesting conundrum. At this point in time, we do not have any guidance from DESE with regard to proms. We anticipate that we should be getting it in the next week or two. But keep in mind that the requirements as far as safety and mitigation strategies for schools are much more stringent than the governor recently releasing or relaxing some of the restrictions. You know, for example, opening up dance floors and permitting indoor gatherings of 100 or less. So I think John and Mary Ann and the Nipmuc staff very much have a dilemma right now, in the sense that I think their heart and soul is into trying to find a way to make this possible and doable, but they also have a significant concern about just safety and the issue that should there be an infection, that contact tracing could be an absolute nightmare. And then you have this cascade effect of implications for graduation and year ends and so on. So that's the context in which we're dealing. And I'd like to turn it over to the two of you to kind of elaborate and share some of your thoughts.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having us here to talk about this. I think that we framed it really well. It was about a year ago that we met with our now senior class president, Kathy Wall, who was talking to us about the challenges of, at that time, the junior class, the class of 21. And, you know, to their credit, they were exceptionally patient, especially as really our whole community gave a big embrace to the class of 20, realizing that happened so suddenly that things were taken away. They were patient, but at the same time, they started a conversation about, let's make sure that we still have some of those iconic rites of passage. This year, they haven't happened. We didn't have a homecoming. We didn't have a fast. If you turn back the clock, the last spring sports season, we weren't able to have that. And now we're looking at prom. This is a group that didn't get prom during their junior year, and now this is a big deal for them. So we're really working to see what we can do to solve this and give them that memory and that experience. Had a ton of support along the way. Parent groups have been phenomenal. Donna Shalala, Marin's mom, has spearheaded a group working in districts. She was able to coordinate with staff members to decorate our lobby a few weeks ago. So when our kids came in, there were signs and streamers and balloons and positive messages. She's been working really closely with Kate Bearden and Johanna Annunziata, our two class advisors, who are bending over backwards to try and make things work. And we've got great officers as well, who are problem solvers and trying to figure this out. As Joe said, that there are just some challenges that we're not quite sure how to solve yet. And you'll hear that it sounds like Nipmuc is not at all alone in this. We've been talking to our colleagues. We wanted to walk you through some of the guidelines of Lakeview Pavilion, where we have the prom set up to be hosted, and then talk about some of the challenges.
Yeah, thank you, John. So I think, like he says, we're focused on getting creative, and we know these plans don't happen overnight. Typically, when we're planning prom or senior events, we're a year out when we're doing it. So, you know, we're creeping up on, May very quickly. So we want to start talking about it. And like Joe said, we're stuck between school guidelines, outside guidelines. Desi hasn't released stuff, but it should be upcoming. So we did have a meeting with Lakeview Pavilion the other day, and their event coordinators, who were very gracious to us in meeting with us. Unfortunately, I think we were the first school that had come to the table to talk to them about prom and about what could be done. There was some other schools that said interested, but they hadn't come to the table yet. So we were kind of meshing our guidelines as we were talking and trying to get on the same page. So we currently have 155 seniors. Lakeview Pavilion indoor gatherings right now are at 100, but Lakeview Pavilion is 2 separate rooms. So they could essentially host almost 2 separate proms for us at the same time. So we'd have to keep in separate rooms, divide the kids however they chose. Chaperones, we need to stay separate because they have to host them as 2 separate events, which obviously is a challenge, but feels like we could overcome that challenge. So the next thing we started to talk about was the gathering of the kids in those 2 spaces. As you know, in schools, we keep pretty close contact tracing on kids and where they're seated and who they're with. The only guidelines that Lakeview has to go by is that kids or people at events are allowed to gather in groups of 6. But that group of 6 can change over the course of the night as many times as they want that to change. The only guideline is you can't have 10 people around the table or 10 people gathering outside. So 6 sounds doable, but when you start to think of 6 all mixed up, you wonder how you trace those students over the course of the evening. They do have some outdoor access, which is great, and they can keep that outdoor access for us. Again, 2 separate events, dividing down the middle so that those groups aren't, mingling, and kids are staying in their assigned spaces with the chaperones, again, sticking with the kids. Talk a little bit about eating, what eating in schools looks like. Not what you think about what eating at a prom would look like. So, in school, it's everyone facing the same direction, 6 feet apart in order to take your mask off. Their guidelines are 6 guests seated at a 6-foot round table. So they're across from each other, eating with masks off. So again, those are outside of school guidelines. And then we have that contradicted within school guidelines and kind of reconciling those 2 pieces. They do require masks. At all times, indoors and outdoors, the only exception being when the kids are eating or the guests are eating. Masks are required when dancing too, so dance floors are open. There are no restrictions on dance floors other than 100 people at the event and that people need to be masked while on the dance floor. So there's not restrictions on distance or how many people can be on that. They are willing to work with us to say, well, we can make 6 mini dance floors in each of the 2 rooms and try and keep the same kids on each of the dance floors. But you see how very quickly it's not turning into the prom that we want it to be for our students. So trying to figure out some of those pieces. Contact tracing at venues just looks like anyone who goes into the venue gives their name and phone number. They hand it over to the Board of Health. So if there was a positive case at that venue, the Board of Health calls all of those 100 people who would then be close contact. Obviously, that poses challenges to the school. We would never want to have 100 close contacts. We'd want our number to be far less than that if we were having something. And the only other thing they said is that there's pictures of soda at the table, so there's no bar area where kids are walking up to get their beverage. So we'll talk through a few of the challenges. I'm sure your brains are already going, but it's nice to have a venue that wants to work with us. It's still open on the 14th, and that may or may not be best case scenario. There may be better options here, but I think trying to reconcile some of those differences in the guidance will be important.
Mary Ann sort of touched on some of the problems, the challenges that we would face already. We got to say the venue was treating the guidelines very seriously, which we were happy about. Even using the outdoor space, they have white markers out on their lawn that are to know 6 people can be here, 6 people can be in this part. So they're really treating it very seriously. They would obviously look for help from our chaperones to make sure it works out. But the first challenge we face, Mary Ann mentioned, is eating. There's just such a clear difference between the guidelines here at school as compared to what you would have in a private event, 3 feet apart, facing each other at a round table. So that's one challenge. The contact tracing stands out to us as the most significant challenge, where if you have someone on the dance floor who the day after prom, 2 days after prom ends up coming up positive, you have to be able to know which student that person was in contact with. Been to a high school dance before, if you remember them, it's hard to sort out who's with who, and there's a lot of movement across the dance floor. So we could mitigate that with the smaller dance floors, but you're still going to need to make a decision about the number of kids to have in a quote unquote pod. You're going to have 3 tables of 6 that spend the entire night together. How are we handling that piece of it? you have the challenge too of kids arriving at prom. So you can do everything right as far as 6 kids at a table and 6 separate dance floors. But if students arrive in one of those mega vans with 18 people or 28 people or whatever it is, now all of a sudden you've got to go back and be able to contact trace that as well. So as soon as you start to look at the logistics, it gets a lot more challenging. And ultimately, our goal is to make sure that we don't have any kids that we're saying you can't attend graduation. And knowing May 14th is the prom, could show up a couple days after that, the students could very easily stretch over to that June 5th date. We're also just talk about this as a reality. If you had some breakdown in the protocol and weren't 100% sure that those 6 kids were together over the course of the night, do you end up needing to take the entire event, 100 kids as close contacts? And what a terrible way to end your senior year. We're not bringing these up to say they're insurmountable. We just want to talk through it practically and get some perspective from you on this. We're working the best we can with our colleagues. We had a principals meeting with Metro West principals on Friday, and we heard a lot of the same questions come up. There were about 20 of us in the Zoom room talking about the challenges of contact tracing and creative ideas they're coming up with. One of the things we're going to look to, in addition to borrowing all their good ideas, we heard multiple times from other town boards of health that the DESE is apparently coming out with prom guidance, and that is expected sometime within the next 2 weeks. If you know the guidance, if you remember the guidance we got last year for graduation, it was, and it just came out actually last week for this year's graduation as well, super clear. Number of people, process into the event, out of the event, what the event should look like, comments on masks and sanitizing. It was very helpful for us as schools not to have to go to our individual town board of health and say, let's organize this thing and figure it out. They gave us clear parameters within which to work. Hearing that could be coming from DESE would be helpful as far as, at least reconciling some of the difference between school guidelines and CDC guidelines. So that is something that we're waiting on.
Yeah, no, I mean, our hope is we want to creatively problem solve with kids, and the class advisors and class officers have been so patient, and they've been amazing through this whole thing. And I think that if we had some clear guidance in terms of MURC, and I think it's not just the prom, it's senior events, it's FAST, it's 8th grade graduation, it's 8th grade semi, it's 4th grade graduation, right? There's a lot of things that happen. It's field day, some clear guidance that I think it would be helpful to allow us to move forward with kids and families so that we can plan what would honor them and celebrate them in a way that's safe and, kind of meets all the needs of our community. I think that's what we want to be able to do.
So right now, the premise is that there would be no junior class. And there would be dates or no dates allowed.
So in order to host it at this venue, it would be senior class only and no dates. Junior class, again, I speak to their patience with us. They know that we're working on sorting out class of 2021, and they're ready. They're asking to meet, and they're just kind of holding back, so that we can figure this out, and then we'll move obviously to work to make the end of the year special for our juniors as well.
To that point, though, that's a good question. We actually have more flexibility than a lot of schools because of Lakeview Pavilion's capacity to have 2 separate events at the same time. I mean, it goes down to even they have 2 separate outdoor spaces that do not connect. So you could have one prom with their own outdoor space and another with a completely separate Lakeview on the side, and be able to run that. I know the community I live in, I think their venue had 100, and they just recently said, sorry, we're going to have to cancel it. I think having the capacity to 200 allows us a little more flexibility.
Definitely understand it's a very complex thing to try to have to break together. State said.
I think, not to be the wet blanket on all of this, because I do applaud John and Mary Ann and working, I know with our advisors like Kate Reardon and, with our class officers. But as I say in the background notes, I do think that this has implications for a
lot of our end of the year celebrations, for example, the 8th grade social, which I know is something that's really significant. Even at the elementary level, we've got the 4th grade move up and the field days and all of those types of events. And I think we've got to also stress that, it's great having all the kids back, but we're not back to normal. Hopefully we're approaching normal, but we still have all of these restrictions in place. As you guys probably know, a half hour before I left here, I chowed down my sandwich for dinner, and I sent out yet another one of those 3 additional COVID-19 cases in district email to all of our families, as I'm required to do so. This is lingering, and sometimes you can even make the case that you've heard all the cliches, like we're spiking the ball on the 20-yard line. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, but we're not there yet. And the reality is we can't have a situation where we're going to have these large-scale events. First of all, most of them aren't even going to be allowable, but also put our students and our staff at risk. It's just not doable. I hope, come June, come May, we're starting to see some type of quasi-herd immunity, and those numbers, as far as number of infections within our 2 towns and across the state, are going south real quick. But unfortunately, we've got a reverse trend where now we're upwards, the daily average is around 2,300. It's going in the wrong direction.
I'm sorry. No, go ahead. I was just gonna say, it says in the background that there's also a possibility that the date be deferred to after graduation. How realistic is that possibility? Because if we're going to attempt something like this, it sounds like it would be a better idea to at least let them experience the graduation so that they're not missing out on other activities.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the options. If you run the whole gamut, then you look at the possibility of there not being a prom, being able to hold it on May 14th. Perhaps bringing something on campus, if DESI guidelines allow for a little more flexibility for schools on campus outside, moving it beyond the June 5th graduation. All those are in play, and we're interested.
After graduation, is the possibility at Lakeview after graduation, or would that require much venue?
They're so flexible, and honestly, I think part of it too is they're not getting a lot of events right now. So they want to do what they can to work with us, keep our business. So we would hope that we would be able to continue working with them.
Question that I was going to ask as well as what's the reaction from the students and parents about that option? That's kind of the bottom of the barrel,
Yeah, honestly, we're meeting with them this week. We were holding off, obviously. We had that principal meeting Friday. We knew we were coming tonight. So again, just trying to get as many details as you can so you know what you're working with. If we're awaiting DESI guidance and it's 1 to 2 weeks out, I think the conversation's got to be about realistically planning a prom from April 26th to May 14th. If you pull something off in, a 2-3 week span and have a prom. Or based on the guidelines, is it what the kids even want? Is that what they envision it being? Or do they want something different that, kind of better meets their needs or falls into the picture of what they're looking for? So we haven't had those conversations. Those will be coming, but, having more details helps us be more clear with them and give them, a better understanding of what we're working with. I think we're all holding out hope. I think that's what we all want, to have as many of these as possible, but get the reality too. I would never want to have to tell a student that they could not be at their graduation because they were a close contract to someone. It's out of their doing, and obviously we have to follow the health and safety guidelines, but I couldn't imagine placing that phone call to a parent saying that, or to a student saying that.
Thank you for all your efforts.
So we'll keep you posted. Thank you, guys.
Okay, last but not least this evening, another delightful topic, that being MCAS. I have for your edification, just last week, the Grafton School Committee drafted this letter to Governor Baker, to Commissioner Riley, and their state rep Meridian and State Senator Moore, who we share with in Upton. Basically asking that the motion be put in place to have once again a moratorium for MCAS. I fully support this. As I say in the background notes, both MASC and MASS are kind of leading the way in trying to push our legislature to have a moratorium. Keep in mind, just like last year, there's two pieces that have to occur. The U.S. Department of Education needs to issue a waiver, and then the state government or the DESE would also have to solicit for a waiver. And in Massachusetts, because MCAS is codified into law, it actually has to be voted upon by the legislature and signed by Governor Baker. So as you can imagine, I think both of our associations are of this mindset that it's been such a challenging school year. And now we're in a place where we're getting our kids back full time. Do we really need to be putting the time, the energy, and the effort for taking them away for a period? It could be anywhere between 4 to 6 days for MCAS testing. As the Grafton letter notes, the annual allocation for MCAS across the state, across all grades, is $30 million. Given the place that we're in right now, there probably that $30 million could be allocated for things to meet kids' needs better. I feel pretty strongly about this, and I think, as I say in the background notes again, I think at a bare minimum, deferring it to the fall might be a good fallback position, but I think this spring it does not make a lot of sense. We still have not received any guidance for the middle school or the high school testing, but I can tell you, as far as it being a high stakes test as a graduation requirement, it's going to be required right now for not only 10th graders, but also 11th grade students as well. And then there's also the expectation that our students in the standalone remote program would be coming here or coming to their school to take the MCAS. And as I also say, I'm starting to see more and more of a drive towards opt-out. So I think given this whole gestalt of opinions and situations, I think it makes a lot of sense to ask for a moratorium. So I bring this to your attention to see if you would be interested in offering a letter to this effect to our four reps and also to the governor and to Commissioner Riley, taking a stand on requesting the moratorium. I can tell you this year I serve as the president of the Worcester County Roundtable. We will be doing the same thing as a group of 42 superintendents across Worcester County. And we will actually also be soliciting our 2 senators and Representative McGovern in Congress to also request for a national waiver as well.
I absolutely support that. I feel very strongly that the limited the amount of time that we have left in this school year should be spent on test prep. And frankly, I don't think our kids need the stress of MCAS on top of the stress of returning to school 5 days a week in April, and then just to follow that up with MCAS a few short weeks later. I don't think that's the right thing to do.
Well, there's nothing too. I think we look at the term for and also the second half of the year, and the way that we split up the year, I think it's shorter in the second half.
Generally speaking, the quarters are 45 days, 40, 4 of 45 days.
Maybe I'm thinking of the AP test taking place.
Yeah, that is definitely a factor, Sean.
So obviously I'm picking my own child here.
Yeah.
I apologize for that. But it seems to me that, that putting another requirement on this semester at the end of the year seems like a very bad choice for our kids. We've got a lot of things to worry about just to keep the end of the year going. So I would approve definitely what it means then.
And keep in mind, accountability is important. And I want to be very, very clear and very explicit about, DESE has communicated to superintendents that this will not be used to determine a school's accountability. However, we will be public with the results, but we want to see, we feel like it's important to administer it across the state to ascertain learning loss, to ascertain how much the kids grow and so on. But keep in mind, and this is going to be one of our discussion topics at the next meeting. We've invested as a district in this iReady testing. We are doing benchmark and diagnostic testing. We do have a handle on where our kids are individually and in the aggregate. So I do think it's a bit of a red herring to say, oh, we need MCAS as some type of diagnostic tool to ascertain learning loss. That's really not what MCAS is designed for, quite frankly.
Right on the heels as well of them changing the standards of the MCAS. But we're still in a position where we haven't quite caught up to the new standard.
A little bit. Probably one of the biggest factors where it was changed most recently was at the high school level, the year before we went out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does this also apply to access testing?
It does.
For the ELLs?
It
Okay, so
does,
our
yes.
English language learners are also.
Absolutely.
within this
Same
framework.
situation.
Right.
Yeah.
We did pass a resolution back in October, did we not, at my instigation?
Yes.
Towards this being, that mask had initially. supported.
Correct. To support it. Yes.
Right. And I think most of us are even more firmly in favor of holding this moratorium. How would the absence of MCAS scores affect the John and Abigail Adams scholarship? Does that have you? Right?
That's a very
Is
good
that-
question.
Or
Yeah.
is that a question for Commissioner Riley to sort out?
Yes. Yeah. I'm not 100% sure of that, but that's a good question.
Yeah. That would be a question.
Okay, so I will, if it's okay with the committee, I will author something and I will have a draft off to you by tomorrow morning. Okay.
Other further comments or questions on that?
I just had one point of information. I'm not sure if anybody saw the mask listserv today, but there has been a call to contact our legislative leaders about supporting a commission to examine early and end times of school. So I believe it's a bill number HD 2548 that would establish a commission to review optimal start and end times in schools. So that was just something that came up. It might be a good future agenda item if we want to turn their attention to. Thanks.
Start at times in terms of beginning and end of the school
Yes,
year. or
a
beginning and end
day.
of the school
No,
day?
school day, right? Yeah, the later start times because of the Zoom schedules and those kinds of things have been one strange beneficial effect. So I think they're requesting a 2-year study at the state level.
To look to standardized just
Right.
across the state.
Yeah, because one of the challenges, because we've examined this before at the committee level, and one of the challenges is a district can't typically stand alone in changing their start times because of sports schedules and other kinds of, concerted efforts that have to be taken. So if it's examined, then best practices are directed down from the state, it may be more advantageous because the scientific background on that information is clear. And the paper for later start times, especially for the high school students. So just something to put on the radar. Yeah, because we're all so bored these days, right?
Do we have any correspondence?
We do not.
Okay. Other matters not anticipated by the committee within 48 hours of the posted meeting. Hearing none. Future agenda items include the iReady assessment administration and preliminary data on April 12th. And with that, we'll roll call to executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, exemption number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to negotiations with the Regional Teachers Association, because doing so in open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the committee. The committee will not return to open session.
Second.
Carrie Lawrence, aye.
Sonic is aye.
Bill Desotter, aye.
Vicky Levy, aye.
Lee Martin, I.